Qi, the vital life source that exists inside of every living being. The word comes from traditional Chinese, meaning air in the sense of life force and energy flow. For centuries, it's been used in Chinese martial arts and healing practices. The act of balancing qi is referred to as qigong. Those who believe in this mystic force say it's the energy which flows through and within us. Qi must remain balanced in order to bring good health and a stable mind. The notion itself in scientific terms is a pseudoscience, unproven as there's no way to directly observe it. And yet despite this, it's an ancient practice that remains strongly practiced and followed, even to this day, with many believers and healers who follow these classical teachings and beliefs. So today we'll be taking a look at the concept of qi, and about the fabled extraordinary individual Zhang Chong, otherwise known as Dynamo Jack. Zhang Chong is a qi master and acupuncturist who rose to fame in the 1980s. The healer, who is from Indonesia, was part of an Indonesian travel documentary by Lorne and Lawrence Blair. The documentary Ring of Fire East of Krakatoa was broadcast on public television and depicted Zhang Chang's practices. He was referred to as Dynamo Jack due to his desire to keep his identity a secret. In The Mungus of Java, a book written about Cheng's life, we learn that he was forbidden from accepting any payment for his healing work by his mentor. In other words, he was prohibited from gaining a profit by using his sacred abilities. For 20 years, Chong worked as a driver to earn money for himself and his family, including his 7 children. This was just enough to keep him financially affluent. The family was in trouble with poverty for many years, and misfortunes before them often joined the months prior to the documentary. Chong claims to have summoned the spirit of his old mentor, who told him his financial concerns would soon ease. The spirit had been right, for financial opportunities soon arrived. The Blair brothers found him in Java and asked him if he would like to be in their documentary. Initially, he refused. He stated, "I'm only a healer." Lawrence Blair stated in an interview, "We followed him around Java on his healing rounds and asked if we could film him, but he always declined, saying his powers resulted from a type of meditation with an ancient tradition of secrecy. Only when my brother Lorne was suffering from a serious eye infection that he finally allowed us to film him in 1987. End quote. Lorne's healing session with Dynamo Jack was recorded and included in the documentary. Lorne laid still as Dynamo Jack placed acupuncture needles into his arms. The action caused them to move sporadically, qi allegedly flowing through them. After the experience, Lorne stated, "It wasn't like any acupuncture I've had. I was getting very powerful electric shocks and couldn't control my movements." End quote. Chong then explained the process of what he was doing. He was transferring his positive yang and removing Lawrence's negative yin, and linking them together, which created physical electricity. He explained, "Inside our bodies, both flow in equal amounts. These energies are opposites, they can never meet. Yin and yang normally run parallel to each other, never letting go of one another. I used my yin and yang together as one. This is why I can do what I do. By itself, yang qi cannot pass the limits of the body." According to the brothers, Chong had the powers of primacy. He took a newspaper outside with the intention of showcasing this. He held out his hand over the paper. Concentrating as he did this, smoke began to form from the paper, bursting into flames. Chong had made a sacred oath not to reveal the secrecy of his powers to anyone other than pure-hearted students, with the desire to learn and heal. When the documentary was published and broadcast, Chong despised the sudden popularity it gave him. Immediately, the contact he had with the brothers was current. Lawrence said the following in an interview, "When he heard we'd shown this footage in the public, he was very upset and refused all our future efforts to contact him. As the years passed, we sadly resigned ourselves to never seeing him again. My brother, Lorne, never did get the opportunity to meet him again as he passed away." End quote. When Lawrence met with Chong for the second time, he explained that he'd spent 2 years performing deep meditation in Borneo. Chong said that during this time, he had the epiphany that the old knowledge was fading from the common consciousness. he decided to do another documentary to remind humanity of the power that dwells inside us, docile and waiting for us to awaken it. He seems able to control the amplitude of this power like a dimmer switch, and it causes uncontrollable responses and the patience. Chong believes that mastering Ing Qi is what will allow people to enter the spirit world. The purpose of Qi in the traditional sense is mixed with the ancient beliefs of otherworldly and the spiritual. Because of the spiritual aspect of Qi, Chong and alternative Eastern practices in general have been placed under scientific scrutiny. Suggestions of Chong using electric shocks with a secret device have been spread throughout the years, but there's no idea why Chong would do this to every single patient he sees, as he would gain no profit from it. Furthermore, even an electronic device would not be able to set off such wild muscle movements so suddenly. This happened in the limbs of the patients after inserting the needles. In acupuncture, the body is said to absorb electrical energy, or said energy is dispelled. The charge is seemingly mild at most. Not to mention that an electrical current and metal needles would mean the acupuncturist would likely be electrocuted by the device. Opinions vary, but many believe in the power of John Chong and Qi. Many Eastern practices are foreign to Westerners. People fear they are known, especially those who cling on to logical science above spiritualism. In the second documentary, a team of American scientists were invited to investigate the practice and could not find any proof of trickery or misconduct with Chang's work. In fact, there was no way in which they could disprove the concept of Qi, nor prove it, however. The idea of Qi originates all the way back to the 5th century BCE in China. The Western viewer may associate the concept of Qi with the now abandoned ancient concept of the four humors, or the ancient Hindu yogic belief. The Chinese philosopher by the name of Mencius, who lived in the 4th century BCE, described Qi as the life force in all living beings. Nature, heavens and oceans, connected together by an invisible force that exists within all of us. Qi was commonly associated with the human body and its health. When the flow of Qi was stable, your body was functioning and healthy. If it was unbalanced, it would cause sickness and disease. As such, the importance of Qi grew over time, and it was vital for people to keep there. The people believed that special exercises and metaphysical treatments could bring longevity and stability to one's life. The concept of Qi has been a crucial part of Chinese and Asians' histories, philosophies, and beliefs. This means, however, there are various descriptions of what Qi is. As time passed, thinkers created various kinds of Qi. According to them, the heaviest fractions produce solid objects and matter. Like divisions of Qi form liquids, like the oceans, and ethyl Qi created life breath. It exists as energy within living beings. These beliefs remained popular during the 20th century, and even now they're still followed. Descendants following the paths laid out by their ancestors. Acupuncture is still a highly praised type of alternative medicine, especially in the East. In the end, we can only speculate on Zhong Chong, or Dynamo Jack, and his abilities. Are they real? Do we all truly possess an unstoppable force within us? Could we unlock unlimited potential with enough determination, practice, and understanding of the life force inside us? Did Zhong Chong really possess psychic abilities and powers, telekinesis, and more? Can we too learn to control such unthinkable powers if we only try hard enough? Or perhaps are some people born to be sacred healers and philosophers, whilst others are not? We are left with 1,000 questions which beg for answers, but some things are forever fated to be mystery. Unfortunately for us, the concept of Qi is not one that's easy to prove or determine. Cannot be quite disproved. Therefore, we'll have to decide what we believe for ourselves. Some people doubt the metaphysical, others believe in it wholeheartedly, and some stay on the fence between the two views, uncertain of where the truth lies. But what is certain is that this enigma is intriguing and worth speculating on. So what do you guys make of Zhong Chong and the power of Qi? The ocean is a vast and dangerous entity at the best of times because of its unpredictable and vengeful tides that can cause entire crowds to disappear without a trace. Nobody knows how many secrets lie captured underneath the surf, And one of the greatest mysteries of the sea is the untold numbers of undiscovered creatures who have made the sunless depths their home. From sea monsters to glowing algae, the beings that lurk beneath the waves are the things of legend. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at some ocean mysteries. Octopus are walking on shore. Octopuses are some of the most well-known sea creatures with their curious 8 tentacles, incredible intelligence, camera-like eyeballs, and slimy bodies. However, a local marine guide from Wales, upon returning from a sunset dolphin watching expedition, witnessed an octopus in a place where he never expected to see one. On dry land, he reported seeing over 24 of the creatures crawling up out of the water on the tips of their tentacles and moving onto the sand as though part of some mass migration. And soon other locals made reports of a similar nature. It is not unheard of for octopi to take a stroll outside of the water occasionally. Those that live in shallow waters near tide pools frequently use the tips of their tentacles to crawl from pool to pool in search of prey, sometimes embarking on longer stretches if they are especially unlucky in the hunt. A popular octopus at the National Aquarium of New Zealand proved his prowess as an escape artist by crawling out of his tank, across the room, down a drainage pipe, and into the sea. However, scientists are baffled as to why so many of the creatures were existing in a group to such a sandy stretch of beach, one with no tide pools or chance of finding food. They breathe through gills and can only survive out of water for very short stretches of time and must remain moist in order to be able to absorb oxygen from the water on their skin, which is why they have never been known to attempt such a long stretch out of the water. Several octopuses were discovered the next morning having died after drying out too much. Scientists are baffled as to what could cause these small, hand-sized cephalopods to behave in such a dangerous manner. It is possible that a huge change in their environment, brought on by incredibly rough seas around the time that they were spotted, local pollution, or an unusually low tide, could have disorientated the octopi enough that they mistakenly clambered onto dry land. Other theories include illness or parasitic infection, although the creatures that were discovered the next morning appeared to have been in perfect health and died from drying out rather than any infection. Alarmingly, scientists don't know what has caused these octopuses to behave in this manner, and are carefully studying the species for any clues. Scientists suggest that octopus could be aliens. When talk turns to potential extraterrestrial life on Earth, most minds immediately jump to conspiracy theorists and science fiction plots. Few expect to read findings from the scientific community hinting at alien life. Yet that is exactly what has recently come to light, and not in the way that you would think. A scientific paper published in 2018 in the journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology attempts to explain the origins of life on Earth and makes some startling hypotheses about the octopus, suggesting that the unusual creature possesses a genome that may have gotten its start from somewhere outside of Earth. When studying the development of species, the octopus presents a unique set of problems, which is what has prompted scientists to look beyond Earth for answers. For most species, distinctive and especially unusual features evolved slowly over millions of years, and this progression can be more or less tracked through the species. However, the striking features of cephalopods, such as their large brains and sophisticated color and shape-changing abilities, arrived relatively suddenly in the evolutionary gene pool. A huge leap such as this is especially unlikely in the more advanced characteristics of a highly developed species. These traits burst onto the scene hundreds of millions of years ago in what is known as the Cambrian explosion, where several modern-day animal groups suddenly began to exist in a form recognizable today. Nobody knows what exactly led to this event, although there are several theories. One possible explanation specifically mentioned in the paper with regards to cephalopods revolves around the cryopreserving ability of space and suggests that a piece of space rock or comet hurtling towards Earth could have contained viable specimens of an early form of fertilized squid or octopus eggs and released its contents as it crashed into our atmosphere, effectively merging extraterrestrial genes with the genomes on Earth. Another hypothesis is that alien viruses crashed to Earth in a similar manner and infected and caused the strange evolution into what we know as octopus today. This is not the first time such a theory has been suggested with regards to the evolution of life on Earth, as it is occasionally brought up as a potential explanation for the currently genetically unexplainable. However, such a theory rests entirely upon the assumption that life does exist elsewhere in the cosmos, and that these life forms could have been transported across the vastness of space on a comet until they reached Earth. Understandably, hypotheses of this nature are impossible to prove, and will likely remain just a hypothesis for the years to come. But the idea that we could be sharing our planet with creatures evolved from extraterrestrials is fascinating. Deep Sea Expedition uncovers 30 new species, plus longest known animal. It is widely accepted that the sea contains thousands of, as yet undiscovered creatures. It seems that every time a research team dives to new depths, they uncover a host of new species. And the April 2020 expedition was no exception. A team of scientists from multiple institutes combined forces to document 20 dives and 180 hours of footage of the Ningaloo Canyons in the Indian Ocean captured by a deep-sea diving robot called ROV Sebastian. The robot was able to penetrate to depths of over 4,500 meters and captured video of many species that had not been seen in the area before, as well as several apparently entirely new species. Among these new discoveries was a giant red hydroid, which is a relative of the coral that appeared to be over a meter tall, as well as a new member of the Apolemia that is estimated to be over 47 meters long, making it the longest animal ever recorded. Technically, the Apolemia is made up of a giant colony of cell-like creatures called zoids and is classified as a siphonophore. Because it is made up of millions of tiny individual creatures, some would say that the Apolemia in itself cannot be classified as its own entity. However, siphonophores are particularly fascinating because each of the zoids, despite being individual creatures and not cells, act as if they were, each carrying out specific functions that contribute to the viability of the larger whole, such as food digestion, reproduction, and propulsion. The Apolemia is without a doubt a creature of otherworldly proportions, as it was glimpsed of the diving robot. The structure is not where the extraterrestrial illusions stop either, as the zooids are described by scientists as a jelly made of millions of interconnected clones, with each clone being specialized to do one of a dozen different tasks. What makes this specimen stand out so vividly for researchers is its enormous size. Most siphonophore colonies that have been observed so far have been between 17 centimeters and 1 meter long, entirely dwarfed by the 47-meter length of this colony, whose hunting spiral spread across almost a 16-meter diameter, with tendrils dangling into the water below. The discovery of such an enormous example of a species already known has excited researchers about the immense possibilities for what could lie beyond the realm of our exploration, and one of those things could be millions more giant siphonophore galaxies just like this one, simply waiting to be discovered. Among the other species that were observed in the dives into the deep sea off of Western Australia were bioluminescent squid, glass sponges, long-tailed sea cucumbers, mollusks, barnacles, and squat lobsters that were previously not known to inhabit this part of the ocean. Specimens from the dives were collected and will be on display in Australia. It seems that the ocean will never fail to amaze us with its mysteries, and we may never truly know exactly how many unknown species are hidden and undiscovered in the uncharted depths. The deeper and deeper we are able to dive and discover, the more we understand that legends and ancient myths of sea monsters and unbelievable sea creatures might just be closer to the truth than we ever dared to imagine. We simply must continue to probe the deep sea floor in order to understand the truth of what exactly we are sharing our valuable planet with. But what do you make of these ocean mysteries? Pirate stories have been popular with people of all ages. Pirates rule the sea with their bravery and terror, finding secret treasure, plundering ships, and never backing down from a fight. So today, here at Unexplored Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 fascinating pirate stories. Pirates take on the Navy, and it doesn't go well. Pirates have been a prevailing problem off the Somalia coast since the Somali Civil War. For years, these pirates have obstructed shipping operations, which has caused shipping costs to increase by billions of dollars in global trade. On March 18, 2006, the USS Cape St. George and USS Gonzales Navy ships from Norfolk, Virginia were on patrol. They were working to avoid these pirates near the coast of Somalia through carefully conducted security operations. At around 5:30 that morning, a fishing boat approached the two Navy ships with several other sniffs in tow. The teams on the USS Gonzales prepared for a routine boarding, which was done for security purposes. However, they quickly noticed that the men on the vessel, who they suspected were pirates, were armed with grenade launchers. The pirates opened first on the USS Cape St. George and caused only minor damage. The Navy ships returned fire quickly. One of the pirates passed away and 5 were injured. A fire was started on the main pirate vessel, which soon sank. All of the naval officers survived with no injuries. The 2 small skiffs were captured by Navy crew and they brought 12 pirates into custody. They also took all of their grenade launchers and other weapons. The 5 injured pirates were taken to an assault ship for treatment and eventually sent back to Somalia. 4 years later, the same pirates were sentenced to life in prison for piracy after attacking another Navy ship. The International Maritime Organization has warned all ships, including military ships, to stay away from the Somali coast as much as possible due to the large number of pirate attacks. Just from 2004 to 2005, the number of pirate attacks had increased from 2 to 7. And Bonnie, during a time when women didn't have equal rights as men, and Bonnie did a remarkable job at making a name for herself as a respected pirate. She was known as the toughest and deadliest woman to ever sail the high seas. She became such a legendary woman that it's now difficult to say what's actually true. It's believed Anne Bonny was born in Ireland in 1697. She was said to be the illegitimate child of a lawyer named Mary Brennan. After William's affair became public, he left Ireland with Mary and Anne. William bought a plantation in Charleston, South Carolina, and began his career all over again. Many tales have been told of Anne's teenage years, but no one knows what's true. Some people claim she took the life of a servant. Other people have said and put a man in the hospital after he tried to assault her. Though these stories have never been confirmed, they did help her reputation as a pirate later on. When Anne was 16 years old, she met and fell in love with a pirate named James Bonny, who wanted to inherit her father's estate, though her father never approved of the relationship and married James anyway. His father was so angry and disappointed with her that he forced her to leave his home. James and Anne went to live in a pirate's hideout in New Providence, but James found it too difficult to support her. To make better money, he became an informer for Governor Woodes Rogers. He had to hunt down pirates and bring them to be punished for their crimes. Because Anne had become friends with so many pirates, she was disappointed with James' new role. With the help of her friend Pierre, Anne was able to leave her husband and be with Calico Jack Rackham, who had previously offered to buy her from James. Calico Jack Rackham was a pirate captain who often attacked coastal shipping. Though he hadn't been very successful, he wanted everyone to believe he was. He often spent money on extravagant things to appear better off than he was. Anne's relationship wasn't public outside of his ship, but everyone on the ship referred to her as the captain's woman. At this time, it was highly unusual for a woman to be on ship. It was considered bad luck. Anne often disguised herself as a man when they pillaged other ships. She never felt the need to hide her true identity from her shipmates, but one refused to accept her because of her gender, and took the life of this man and threw his body overboard. If any other shipmates had a problem with her, they didn't show it after that. Eventually, Anne found out that she was pregnant, and Calico left her in Cuba to have the baby. No one knows what happened to their child. Some believe Anne abandoned the child. Others believe one of Calico's friends raised the child for them. Still, others believe the child may have passed away at birth. A few months after she'd had the baby, Anne returned to Calico's ship. Now, though, there was another woman on board. A pirate named Mary Read had joined the crew after Calico's crew had attacked her ship. Anne and Mary got along well and became good friends. Some of the crew even believed they were in a romantic relationship behind Calico's back. In October 1720, Captain Barnett, a commander of the British Navy, attacked Calico's ship. Since most of the crew was drunk, it was a short fight. Only Anne and Mary had put up a real fight, but they were quickly overpowered. The crew was taken to Port Royal for their trial. This particular trial was a bigger deal than most trials involving pirates because of Anne and Mary. No one liked that they had come from traditional backgrounds and had fought so hard for equality between men and women. The whole crew were found guilty of piracy and all passed away due to hanging. Both Anne and Mary, however, were spared because they said they were pregnant. Mary passed away from a fever while in a Jamaican prison. No one truly knows what happens to and after that. The prevailing story is that her father paid for and to be brought back home. According to this tale, she remarried in 1721, had 8 more children, and passed away in 1782. Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart, is perhaps the most successful pirate who's ever lived. With a boldness and fearlessness like no other, he successfully plundered around 400 ships. He wasn't afraid to attack even the biggest warships he encountered. Bartholomew was born in South Wales and was always interested in ships. While working as a third mate on a British ship, pirate Howell Davies captured the ship and forced Bartholomew to join his crew. Before long, he had become Howell's favorite crew member. When Howell passed away in an ambush in 1719, the crew voted for Bartholomew to be the new captain. The crew avenged their former captain's loss of life and headed to Brazil, where they plundered many ships. They managed to steal ships and other goods to take with them. They moved on to the American colonies and sold what they had stolen. They took more ships and burned many as well. Although Bartholomew appeared to be a calm person for the most part, he was a very cruel pirate. At one point, he captured a ship with 80 slaves and burned it without bothering to save any of them. He later captured and hanged his archenemy, the governor of Martinique. His reputation was known all over the world, and everyone feared him. He wreaked havoc and caused terror everywhere he went. In February 1722, Captain Shalona Ogle was sent out by the British government to capture Bartholomew and his crew. He found them in Cape Lopez, where they were drinking and celebrating. Bartholomew was shot and passed away almost immediately. His crew threw his body in the water as he had wished. They soon surrendered and were taken to the Cape Coast Castle for their trial. So what do you make of these pirates and their stories? The Antarctic offers perhaps some of the best views on the planet, but what some may not be aware of is that you can visit it. Various companies offer cruises that allow you to get close to some of the local wildlife. Some of the things you can expect to see here are seals, whales, and penguins, but others have reported seeing more mysterious things. Recently, this photograph has been making the rounds on social media, with many users saying it shows a UFO hovering above an iceberg. One of the last places you'd expect to see an unidentified flying object is in Antarctica, but many UFO researchers have said this location is actually somewhat of a hotspot. Various sailors and explorers have reported seeing UFOs in this region, with amateur researchers saying there's more going down in these regions than what we know. One person said the following after seeing the photograph. "I've seen something similar to this while on a cruise to Antarctica. I remember it very clearly. I was on the cruise with my partner. We'd saved a lot of money to do this as the cruise wasn't cheap. We had a balcony view, and one of my favorite things to do was look out into the sea of ice. Many times I wouldn't see anything of interest, but it was just an interesting sight, and one that I'm not likely going to see again for a very long time. One of the things I saw, though, confused me. While looking out at the ice, I could see 4 large icebergs, and on one of these icebergs there was a large sphere-like object towards the top. I thought it was just a strange piece of ice, but then it suddenly started to rise slowly. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It did this very slowly before it shot away. I told my partner what I saw and she didn't believe me, saying that it was most likely just a piece of ice that got pushed upwards. But this wasn't what happened. The object stayed above the iceberg for several seconds before it shot off. It's easily the strangest thing I've ever seen. And when I saw this image, it immediately reminded me of it." End quote. Others have suggested a similar thing for this image, saying that it isn't a UFO, but rather a piece of ice that's just been pushed upwards, making it appear as if it's an unidentified flying object hovering above the iceberg. Some, though, have denied these claims and have said that Antarctica is a hotspot for UFOs. So why do researchers say that unidentified flying objects are seen in this region? Amateur researchers have said that alleged crafts were found here by the Germans during the 1930s and that these crafts were kept a secret by the country. knowing that they could easily advance their tank. One thing that isn't a secret is that many German scientists were allegedly carrying out advanced testing, and these were on a variety of different projects. But researchers say that something happened during this time that helped advance them forward. There were several reports, fictional stories, comic books and theories that claim that unidentified flying objects belonged to Germany during this time, and that they were carrying out experiments on these crafts. But over the years, evidence for these claims have been limited. The cigar-shaped UFO was first sighted towards the end of 1945, and this was by a group of airmen who were riding into the night. According to the report, the flight was around the French-German border, when Lieutenant Fred Ringwald saw lights over the hills. Other lieutenants who were with Fred also noticed the lights, saying that they were orange in color and silent. Thinking the lights may have been some sort of weapons from the enemies, Lieutenant Ed Slaughter, who was the pilot of the flight that night, fired at the light and it vanished. That night marked the beginning of several sightings of the flying object. Reasons Germany and no other country was connected to UFOs was because there was reports claiming that Germany had developed advanced aircrafts or spacecraft prior to the years of 1945. Another reason would be the fact that the flying objects were sighted in Europe, which was predominantly occupied by Germany. Also, history has it that the sightings stopped shortly after the Germans were defeated. Allegedly, after 1945, several machineries were found in secret underground bases in South America, Antarctica, and the United States which were linked to Germany. The cigar-shaped mysterious objects were also linked to a rock end, which brought the assumption of von Braun working on it, as Braun had earlier created the V2 rock end. It's been suggested by some researchers that the Germans even looked at unconventional means to achieve power. Whispers of an anti-gravity machine were spreading. This machine was given the name of Die Glocke. This means the bell. The machine in question was described as being able to manipulate matter and even travel in time. One of the issues, though, is trying to back up these claims, with one UFO researcher saying the following. This being whispers that Germany was in possession of one of these devices, but one of the problems is backing up these claims. They fit the idea that Germany was so advanced at the time, and that they may have had help, but until solid evidence is presented, it's likely that the Bell story will just be lost to history. And besides, it's not likely they're going to come forward and admit they have this in their power. The likelihood of anyone getting any hard evidence of this device is very slim. End quote. As of right now, these are just stories. Something that frustrates many that research the UFO phenomena. Others have said we have evidence of these crafts on things like Google Earth, saying that large objects can be found embedded in the ice, and most of the time these are disk and shame. But again, skeptics hit back at these claims and just say these are cases of pareidolia. This is when the mind tricks us into thinking that something is there when it isn't. It seems that the argument about whether UFOs are genuine is an ongoing one, and with recent announcements from things like the government, UFO researchers have said the future is looking bright, but that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So what do you guys make of this photograph? And do you think any of the stories are true that there's UFOs in Antarctica? Halloween is without doubt one of the creepiest times of the year. There are tales of many mythical creatures from all around the world, but there seems to be a large number of them originating from Irish legends. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 chilling Halloween entities. The Celtic Demon King. Celtic mythology has long focused on evil spirits, demons, mythical entities, and sometimes Celtic monsters. While there's many spiritual entities to look at, the Celtic Demon King is most definitely an interesting one. This demonic god goes by the name of Balor and is sometimes also referred to as the god of death. Legend has it he only has one eye and a single enormous leg. But how did he get this way? As a young boy, Balor looked at a fatal potion, and the fumes resulted in the creation of his large eye. He differs from other kings, as he is the king of the Fomorians, which is a demonic race where you'd find demons residing underwater in the sea or lakes. The Fomorians threatened the residents of Ireland for many years, until they were defeated by a god race, known as the Two-Third Deer Danann. It said he could end the life of anyone simply by staring at them with his eye. He kept his eyes shut most of the time, though, to avoid taking anyone's life by accident. Although this is so, he still provided the Fomorians with victims on a regular basis. Unfortunately for Balor, He was attacked by his grandson, Lugas, who ended his life with a slingshot. Ever since the Fomori, monsters have returned to the sea and are now sea monsters who hunt humans. Lugas was an ancient Celtic god, in which Julius Caesar identified with the Roman god known as Mercury. The early Celtic world was heavily influenced by his presence, and his name still remains an influence on European or British places such as Lyon, Leon, and Carlisle. Carlisle was previously called Lunga Valium, translating to strong in the god Lugas. It's interesting to see the role this story has had on Ireland and other European countries. The still shared to this day to keep the legend alive. Another interesting entity is Diro Dhu, the Irish vampire. The next Halloween entity is an Irish vampire known as Diro Dhu. The name translates to bloodsucker, which is fitting as his female vampire was said to seduce men in order to suck their blood. The legend dates back to Celtic origins of a woman who was known for her beauty and was also well known throughout the country. After falling in love with a peasant who her father didn't approve of, she was forced to marry a rich man. She had plans to start a family with the man she fell in love with, but her father gave her to a rich man in exchange for land and money, and he did this for himself and his other children. She begged her father and pleaded in the hope she wouldn't have to marry the other man. On the wedding day, she was dressed in red and gold and looked more beautiful than ever. While everyone enjoyed the party and had a fun night, she vowed that she would one day seek revenge on her father. She was deeply unhappy in the marriage, and her husband treated her bad. Her new husband was cruel and only saw her as a trophy wife, and as a body to use for his own needs. She reached a point of no return and took her own life. Her husband had already found another woman to take her place, and he had done this before the first wife's funeral. They were struck with grief, and her lost love was the most upset of them all. Visiting her grave every single day, he would proclaim his undenying love for her and pray to see her again one day. Although his love for her was a beautiful sentiment, it was not enough to bring her back to life. Seeking revenge, on the other hand, seemed to be enough for dead to return to earth, coming back from the grave as an evil spirit. With no hesitation, she made way for her childhood home to find her father. Standing above him as he slammed, she sucked his blood and took all of his life from him. Next up on her list of revenge was her previous husband, who was surrounded by women. Not realizing she was in the room, she grew angrier until she reached a furious rage. She pounced on him, taking every last breath and drop of blood from his body. Feeling the blood run through her veins made her feel more alive than ever. As her hunger for blood grew deeper, she eventually forgot about her one true love who'd been waiting for her return. Soon after, he became one of her victims, and she continued to prey on other men. Using her beauty as an advantage, she was able to lure them in promising her body to them. One after another, they all fell for her trick, and she sank her teeth into their skin, sucking their blood in an attempt to quench her thirst. The more men she took the life of, the more she craved the blood. The blood gave her strength she'd not had before, and she was consistently on the hunt for more. Luckily for the men, she's only able to come back to life on the anniversary of her passing. To this day, locals meet at her grave in Waterford and put rocks on her grave to stop her from rising from her coffin. Sometimes rocks are found misplaced, or it's said that she's able to move them, and if this happens, men are told to be on the lookout. The last entity is Carmen, the Celtic witch. Our last story is one of the Celtic witches called Carmen, who is a goddess of evil magic. She was a warrior originally from Athens, who arrived in Ireland in an attempt to evade the country. She brought her 3 sons, Dub meaning darkness, Dothra meaning evil, and Dane meaning violence. She did this in the hopes of taking over Ireland. Collectively, they would destroy anything that was in their path and eventually cast a spell on Ireland's crumbs, terrorizing the people who lived in the country. Eventually, they were stopped in their tracks by pupils of the goddess Danu, who fought to capture her to put her in prison and force her sons out of the country. She passed away from grief in prison and was buried in Wexford. She's still known to this day and remembered by the Celtic people. After looking at the tales of these chilling Halloween entities, we're able to see the way in which Celtic mythology plays into Halloween stories. So what do you guys make of these Halloween entities? important that we research strange discoveries. It helps us to better understand the enormous reports found throughout the world and what they could mean for the scientific world around us. According to author Richard J. Doerst, he had come across a number of strange reports made during the early 1800s and up until the 1900s that described North American archaeological discoveries of giant humanoid skeletons, and what was originally presumed to be a race of non-human creatures, but seemed eerily similar to ancient descriptions of a race of giants. For some unknown reasons, the reports, data surrounding the reports, and discoveries taken in for research, such as skeletons, ancient artifacts, and references to the culture of giants, were either completely covered up, destroyed, or hidden from the public. One of the first reports made apparent to the author Richard Dewhurst were the overwhelming number of archaeological discoveries made by common people during the expansion of New York. The first report, titled A History of Livingston Country, New York, 1824, detailed the discovery of an indigenous people's burial mound that uncovered massive humanoid skeletons, and this was discovered by a man named Jesse Stanley. A portion of the report described the following statement. About the year 1820, the mound was removed, and in its removal arrowheads, a brass kettle and knives were thrown out, and number of skeletons were also distant at. Among the bones was a human skeleton of enormous size, the jawbone of which was so large that Adam Hollisander placed it over his own chin and jaw. He was the largest man in the settlement, and his face was in proportion to the rest of his body. End quote. As convincing as it might be to assume that the institute reporting the 1820 discovery had made an error in the proportions of the skeletons, or the exact size of the jawbone, hundreds of additional reports would be made surrounding different mounds discovered in the region. In another New York report titled A History of Western New York, 1804, that detailed the discovery of gigantic humanoid bones that were accurately measured and described by scientific sources, with the report quoted as providing the following statement. Human bones of gigantic proportion were discovered in such a state of preservation as to be accurately described and measured. The cavities of the skulls were large enough in their dimensions to receive the entire head of a man in modern times, and could be put on one's head with as much ease as a hut or a camp. The jawbones were significantly large, and the fit was outside of a modern man's face. The other bones so far discovered appear to be of equal proportion. Portions with the skull and jawbones, several of which have been preserved in the cabinets of antiquarians, where they still may be seen. Oddly enough, as mentioned in this report, the skeletons were preserved, sent to museums and studied by archaeological experts of the time, and yet not a single giant humanoid skeleton can be viewed today or found in any major Native American museums whatsoever. How could there be so many discoveries surrounding giant Native American skeletons, and yet none of them are on display today to be studied or viewed? As Richard U. Huss continues throughout his book, he points to one organization deceiving the narrative throughout his life. Richard U. Huss writes the following quote, After the Civil War, the Smithsonian began to adopt a policy of excluding any evidence of direct front interference in the Americans prior to Columbus. Some have argued it was an attempt by the fractured post-war government to downplay any regional and ethnic conflicts in the still fragile national rebuilding after the war. Others have pointed to the expansionist policies incorporated in the Manifest Destiny, and the desire to obscure the origins of the tribes being displaced and annihilated by Western expansion. Still, others have alleged that it was a direct religious policy adapted to counter the growing problem with the Mormon religion, and its assertions that the lost tribes of Israel were found in America. End quote. Could this mean that the Smithsonian Institution in its entirely white to cover up the possible origins of humanoid giants? Or was it a far simpler explanation used to prevent the destruction of commonly held theories at the time? Dewhurst goes on to explain that throughout his studies, the majority of the evidence surrounding the Smithsonian active policies of excluding any gathered archaeological discoveries that did not conform to their own narrative centers around one map. Major John Wesley Powell, a geologist of whom was directly responsible for many policies of exclusion of evidence. As it turns out, when the United States Congress first established the Bureau of Anthology back in 1879, Major John Wesley was declared its first director, holding that position until his eventual passing away in 1902. Was created with the sole purpose of being responsible for the transferring of archives, records, and materials relating to the Indians of North America from the Interior Department to the ownership of the Smithsonian Institution. It was during this time as director of the Bureau of Anthology that Major John Wesley, seen as the lone expert of the geography of the American West, was asked to write up an extensive report surrounding the history of ancient tribes, their most likely origins. After finishing this report, rather than it be confirmed by other experts, archaeologists, or explorers in their field, Major John quickly uses reports as the official policy of the Smithsonian Institution, with little sway in its writings for the next 100 years. Additionally, John Wesley would write a report to the Secretary of the Smithsonian titled the following: On Limitations to the Use of Some Anthropological Data, in which he actively asserted that there was no reason and no benefit to trying to discover the origins of North American native tribes. The report is directly quoted as saying the following: hints of customs may be discovered, but outside of this, the discoveries made have often been illegitimately used, especially with the purpose of connecting the tribes of North America with people of so-called races of antiquity in other portions of the world. In the study of these antiquities, there's been much unnecessary speculation in respect to the relaxation existing between the people to whose existence they attest, and the tribes of Indians inhabiting the country during this historic period. There is therefore no reason for us to search for an extraliminal origin through lost tribes of the arts discovered in the mounds of North America." End quote. Unfortunately, following these reports, the later 20th century Secretary of the Smithsonian between 1907 and 1927, a man by the name of Charles Walcott, would adopt the PAL doctrine as the official stance of the Smithsonian Institute for the rest of the 20th century. In fact, even today the PAL doctrine is considered to be the official stance held by the Smithsonian, despite the fact that many modern-day archaeologists and historians are attempting to speak out in support of evidence of a wide number of set-in attempts made prior to the European settlements of the 18th century. The author of the find, Richard Dohorst, attributed the policy to evidence of an overwhelming cover-up of not only discoveries of giant humanoid skeletons all across North America, but of any artifacts that could imply past European origin or expansion into the new kept hidden prior to the colonization efforts made by Christopher Columbus. Even today, the currently held theory adds to the origin of Native Americans. It's centered around a purely theoretical argument of past ice ages, having formed ice bridges connecting all continents of the world together, and allowed for the travel for Africa all the way to the Southern Americas, despite the lack of any evidence for this claim. Richard Yu has provided the following statement in his study surrounding the cover: "The great crime and tragedy of this policy is hard to compute. One glaring result has been the suppression of hundreds of out-of-context finds, all submitted to the museum in naive ignorance of the museum's official policy of suppression of alternative perspectives. To compound the problem, all major universities in the United States also adopt this policy in conjunction with the official position of the Smithsonian, thus making it impossible to study alternative American history and receive any grants or funding for pursuits of this nature. Although it's impossible to find any of the recovered joint humanoid skeletons in the modern day, it has become apparent that an active cover-up has been taken by North American discoveries that put into question the validity of the PAL doctrine. Until private institutes make their own attempts to uncover the hidden Native American burial mounds that tend to hide giant humanoid skeletons all across the country, it appears that educational institutes will continue to cover up the truth for the foreseeable future. Another interesting discovery is the one made inside the Lovelock Hames. A group of archaeologists from the University of California discovered a number of strange objects inside the Lovelock Hames. Among the objects were mummies of red-haired giants. These mummies were said to be between 8 and 10 feet tall. As they were found in the Lovelock Cave, these giants were given the name of the Lovelock Giants. The archaeologists also discovered a pair of large sandals, far too large to fit an average human's feet. These sandals were 15 inches long, and they had signs showing that they were once worn by someone. Researchers also discovered a handprint on one of the stones in the Lovelock Cave. The imprint came from a massive hand. Many of the items found in the Lovelock Cave are held today in different museums and also private collections. In 1931, 2 large skeletons of red-haired giants were found very close to Lovelock Cave. These amazing discoveries have led many people to believe that at one point in time, giant humans once walled our planet. So what do you think of these archaeological discoveries surrounding impossible to explain humanoid giant skeletons found all across North America and the strange cover-up of conflicting archaeological discoveries made by the Smithsonian Institute and subsequently the entire field of North American studies. Space is truly the final frontier when it comes to new discoveries. Every year, month, and even day, scientists are working hard to try and crack the code of our universe. This results in tons of amazing discoveries being made all the time. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 space discoveries. Object on the edge of Saturn's ring. We all know about Saturn's rings. Those big disks made up of thousands upon thousands of rocks, dust particles, and other space bits that circle around the second largest planet in our solar system. What you may not know of is the discovery made in 2013 of a mysterious object on the edge of a gas giant's famous rings. Managed to spot an object by the edge of Saturn's ring. Scientists were baffled at the discovery and gave it an equally baffling name of Peggy. The odd object was first seen on April 15, 2013 by a total accident. Cassini's cameras were pointed towards a small moon called Prometheus. Prometheus orbits Saturn between the planet's rings. As Cassini was positioned in Prometheus view, researcher Carl Murray of Queen Mary University of London noticed something rather peculiar on A-ring's edge. At a talk during the 2013 American Geophysical Union Conference, Murray said, "I've not seen anything like this personally in the A-ring." Since Murray began his work investigating the strange object on the day of his mother-in-law's 80th birthday, he decided to name it after her, and thus Peggy was born. Peggy is believed to be about 1 kilometer across. This makes it too small to be a moon, or a small variety called a moonlet. A physicist named Matthew Hedman, an academic working from the University of Idaho, also played a role in Cassini's imaging project. Matthew Hedman wasn't involved in the mysterious object, but he stated that what Murray observed was a disturbance in the rings. Unfortunately, we still don't know what Peggy actually is. One theory suggests Peggy is actually a gathering of matter that's collapsed under its own gravitational weight. It's believed that a number of moons orbiting Saturn were created this way. They initially started as builds-up of materials before forming small satellite objects. If this is the case, the discovery of Peggy would be the first time this process has been seen happening. There's also a possibility that Peggy could be known as a transient feature. This is a collection of material that's formed to make something larger before breaking up again. However, when Murray went back into Cassini's archives to check whether this was the case, he was able to find images of Peggy as far back as June 2012. The team working on the Cassini project had put forward a further examination of Peggy. This will hopefully shine some light on its nature in the near future. Scientists are especially observant during certain parts of the year, when the gravitational balance from the 2 moons named Janus and Epimetheus causes the A-ring to expand outwards. The cow-bright flash seen in Hercules constellation. In June 2018, an unprecedented burst of explosive light covered space and hovered above the skies of Earth for several weeks. This event originated from the center of the Hercules constellation. This is over 200 million light-years away. The light emitted during this event had the same intensity of around 100 supernovas. It made headlines across the world before disappearing back into the ether. The strange event was given the name the Cow, which was shortened from the randomly generated name at 2018 Cow. The Cow was by no means an average supernova event. We now know the Cow could very well have been the first birth of a black hole or neutron star seen from Earth in recorded history. From theory, we know that when a star collapses, neutron stars and black holes are born. That said, we've never actually seen this happen. At the 223rd meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Seattle, researchers from dozens of different observatories collaborated to observe the Cow from as many lenses as possible. All over the world, telescopes watched the Cow as it blasted across the skies before disappearing a few days later. Through a combined effort, the astronomers pulled their resources together to image the Cow in vivid detail. This multi-telescope effort helped to show that the Cow's display was something never seen before in modern human history. One unusual aspect of the Cow was how impressively fast it dissipated. Once it appeared over the skies of our planet, it took less than 16 days for it to use the majority of its energy. During this period, It shot out hydrogen and helium particles at lightning-fast speeds. This short lifespan is much faster than what's expected when it comes to other similar explosions. These can sometimes take years to complete. As the cowl began to fade from the cosmos, researchers were able to see right into the center of the explosive light display. What they saw was amazing. Brewing in the middle of the cowl, there was something incredibly hot and radioactive. It was spilling radiation out that lingered for months after the lights had faded. Because of all these observations, scientists strongly believe that what we witnessed was the formation of a black hole or neutron star. The amazing display of light's sudden disappearance just shortly after it appeared is explained by it being pulled in by the mysterious object's gravity at light speed. If this is true, the cowl would be the first-hand recorded instance of a black hole or neutron star formation. This proximity to Earth makes it even more spectacular. Since 200 million light-years is relatively close in context of the scope of the universe, this event is the closest kind of transient object that researchers have been able to observe. The cowl has been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for modern astronomers as well as stargazers. It was an incredible chance to see one of the most powerful and most gargantuan processes in the universe play out right in front of our eyes. The star that wouldn't die. When a star collapses, it either explodes or becomes a black hole. These explosions are known as supernovae. They're a fairly common occurrence in a universe filled with stars. Despite this process being normal, astronomers at Las Cumbres Observatory, also known as LCO, found an exciting outlier. What they found was a star that just refused to collapse. Over 50 years, the researchers found this specific star exploded multiple times. However, it seemed to avoid collapsing every time. The supernova, with the name IPTF-14HLS, was found in September 2014. This was by the Palomar Transient Factory. Initially, it looked like any other supernova. However, after months of examination, the LCO astronomers realized this supernova was showing characteristics that had never been seen before. Specifically, the characteristics of getting brighter even after previously exploding. Typically, supernovas grow to their maximum brightness and then dim over a time span of around 100 days. This oddball, however, has gone through different stages of being bright and dim, at least 5 times over the past 2 years. When researchers began to investigate more closely, they took a look at archival data. This showed that there was an explosion in the same space location in 1954. Somehow, the star stayed alive even after the explosion and lived on to explode again in 2014. The study focused on this strange space oddity was led by Dr. Iyer Arkavi, a NASA fellow at LCO and the University of California, Santa Barbara. The work was published in Nature, and speaking of the report, the doctor stated, "This supernova breaks everything we thought we knew about how they work. It's the biggest puzzle I've ever encountered in almost a decade of studying stellar explosions." The lead study estimates the exploding star was at a minimum 50 times bigger than our Sun. In fact, this specific supernova might just be the largest star explosion ever witnessed. The sheer scope of this explosion could help to explain why the event was so unusual. Perhaps conditions for stellar explosions change on larger masses. One theory states that supernova IPTF-14HLS might be what is known as a pulsational pair instability supernova. This means that huge stars reach such soaring temperatures in their centers that energy converts into antimatter. This would cause an explosion that blows off the outer layers of the star and leaves the core complete. This process can repeat over decades before the large final explosion and collapses to a black hole. The leader of the LCO supernova group, Andy Howell, said the discovery of these explosions were only expected to be seen in the early universe and that they should be extinct today. This is like finding a dinosaur still alive in modern day. The supernova group led by Andy Howell is continuing to monitor the strange supernova, which is still glowing brightly even years after its discovery. Luckily, the LCO is uniquely equipped. It's now able to conduct long-term observation. For years now, it's monitored the supernova every couple of days in order to keep a detailed log of its activity. So what do you make of these space discoveries? Mars is a planet that's of high interest. For years, NASA have been carrying out various experiments on the red planet, with other space agencies such as SpaceX saying they're also interested in Mars. even going as far as saying that within the next 10 years they want to put humans on the Martian soil. According to NASA, Mars is a planet that doesn't really have much going on, saying that the climate is harsh and there's no forms of life. Interestingly though, various people have managed to capture some interesting photos of the Martian surface, with amateur researchers saying there's more going on there than what we're being told. One idea that's put forward is that Mars is actually full of precious metals, with gold being one of the main ones. NASA have even said that gold likely exists on Mars in trace amounts. Mars has the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons, and it's been theorized that gold could be near the surface of Mars as this volcano is still relatively young. Going back a few years ago, amateur researchers posted images online allegedly showing what looks like small gold nuggets. One idea that was put forward was that the rock could be from a meteorite impact, and this isn't a far-fetched idea either, with scientists saying that over 200 meteorites hit the planet every year. The photographs were taken on the 26th of November, and NASA scientists said they'll now try to locate the objects so they can take more detailed photographs. These recent images are the ones that's currently making the rounds, allegedly showing what looks like logical deposits on the Martian surface. Various people on Facebook groups gave their opinion on what they could be, with one user saying the following: "I think there's more to Mars than what they're letting on, and these discoveries prove it. I think there are large gold deposits that run through the surface of the planet. Maybe that's why space agencies are gearing up to go there. We know there's water deposits there, so who knows what else is there?" End quote. It seems we'll have to wait for future missions to see if there's as much gold as people make out, or if it's just shiny rocks as some researchers suggest. Although this may be the case. Astronomers have said that space is littered with many interesting objects, one of which is that of the billionaire banking asteroid, more commonly known as 16 Psyche. An asteroid hitting Earth normally isn't a good thing. However, in March 1892, scientists discovered an incredible asteroid that's unlike any other that's out in our vast universe. 16 Psyche, as it was named, is not a rocky or icy body, rather made up of valuable metals that are currently found in our core. Some of these metals are used in everyday industry and some are a little more special. One of these metals is gold. In theory, we have a massive space bank sitting thousands of miles above us, somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. 16 Psyche measures around 140 Mars in amateur and makes up around 1% of it's thought to be a stripped core of another planet, allowing scientists to gain a deeper understanding of what our planet's core is like. It's one of the biggest asteroids in the solar system, meaning if it did hit Earth, it would take a lot of people before anybody got their hands on any gold. However, if in theory scientists could harness the asteroid and bring it back to Earth, then the wealth that could be obtained would be unimaginable. As far as scientists currently know, this value stands at around $700 quintillion. The thing is that making everybody billionaires would basically keep everybody at the same level of wealth they were before. The world economy is only worth around $59 trillion. So if 700 quintillion was injected into it, the entire world economy would crash and would essentially render money worthless. For example, loaves of bread and pints of milk would begin to be priced at millions of pounds and holidays at billions. In other words, there would be a massive inflation. Gold will no longer be worth as much, and this process is already underway as companies start to look at mining asteroids closer to Earth. Whilst we're on the business side of things, companies may begin to monopolize the mining of these asteroids, which would keep gold prices high and out of the hands of the average person. This sort of thing has happened before with valuable minerals and metals. In the 1800s South Africa, the DBS company effectively monopolized the diamond industry, inventing the cliché, "a diamond is forever." Now NASA is hoping to send a craft to visit the asteroid in 2022, arriving in 2026. It offers NASA the chance to research forever about what our own planet is composed of, and to delve deeper into the history of how terrestrial planets came to exist. However, it seems highly unlikely that any of the gold in the chest will be in yours on my hands anytime soon. Something we can only dream of. It does show us, though, an example of what could be out there in the endless expanse of space. This incredible object was found within our solar system, something that is monumentally small when compared to the universe. It's one of the reasons that people have an open mind about things when it comes to our universe. Due to it being so vast, the possibilities are endless. As mentioned, companies like NASA and SpaceX are gearing up to send humans back into space, with missions being planned for the Moon and Mars. SpaceX has announced their plans to send over 1 million people to Mars by 2050. And not only this, but they plan to build an actual city for these people in the hopes that a new civilization can be started. Elon Musk stated in various tweets that the end goal is to get 1 million people on Mars, and he hopes to do this within the next few decades. He also said that he hopes that 1,000 starships can help him achieve this. He goes on to say that the goal is to be able to launch several of these starships a day, so that trips to Mars can be open all the time. So what do you guys make of these recent space discoveries? And do you think there's precious minerals like gold on Mars? Also, if you was given the choice, would you sign up to be sent to the Red Planet? The Amazon rainforest is well known as the world's largest rainforest, spanning over 2 million square miles in South America and running through Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and 6 other countries. Whilst we are all quite aware of the scale of the Amazon, there are plenty of facts, discoveries, and unanswered questions hidden within the trees. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 Amazon mysteries and discoveries. Mystery soil terra preta. The red and yellow soils associated with the Amazon appear on the surface to keep the rainforest vibrant and flourishing. But beneath all that, the soils contain low levels of nutrients, leaving much of the land infertile and unsuitable for farming. Yet the Amazon rainforest produces food, resources, and wonderful greenery. The fertile soil within the Amazon is known as terra preta, informally known as Amazonian dark earth. Terra preta is anthropogenic or artificially made specifically to counter the infertile soil in the Amazon. Terra preta is formed through the indigenous soil management technique known as slash and char. Slash and char is an innovative farming technique that produces fertile soil through the burning of wet vegetation. The ash produced is then transferred into the soil. Other control methods release harmful chemicals and emit twice as much carbon dioxide as slash and char. These involve the dry burning of grass and bush. The key characteristics of terra preta are the dark color of it, hence the name translating to black soil, a high concentration of charcoal, which when weathered creates the dark color, a high concentration of pottery shards and organic matter such as animal feces, fish, and animal bones. The charcoal is the most distinctive aspect of terra preta as it binds together the minerals and nutrients within the soil, allowing them to be retained, otherwise it would decompose with the rain. The charcoal stays in the soil for centuries, even for thousands of years, stabilizing the soil. The high nutrient levels in the soil provide the fertility that makes terra preta so valuable. Some examples of nutrients that have been found include nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, zinc, and manganese. This stimulates higher levels of microorganic activity. There are other attributes to this miracle soil, though these vary depending upon the ecosystem they are in. The nutrient retention of this soil means that farmers are not forced to migrate due to deforestation. Deforestation leaves areas of the rainforest burned, and in these places the soil is fertile for only a short period of time. Usually, these nutrients are swept away with the rain, which is of course a common occurrence in the rainforest. The high levels of charcoal content mean terra preta is less susceptible to nutrient leaching, proving to be incredibly useful to farming communities. Analysis of the content within the soil, largely from the pottery shards, indicate that the soil dates back to between 450 BCE and 950 CE. This has been a huge revelation, as until this analysis we were unaware of civilizations that existed 2,000 years ago who were capable of creating pottery like this, never mind utilizing it to create this rich soil. To give a contextual picture as to the size of this soil, the depth is approximately 2 meters, but the soil regenerates itself at a rate of 1 centimeter per year. Currently, the amount of soil is estimated to cover the same ground as France. Some scientists, largely geologists and archaeologists, have theorized that the soil was created through communal compost piles, where generations after generations have put their food, human and animal waste into these piles. This is evidenced by the patches reaching up to half a hectare in size. Others believe this was not used for agricultural farming, and the sheer volume of soil suggests crop use instead. Modern technology, namely low-temperature pyrolysis, has produced biological discussions at industrial scales, suggesting that the revolution could have occurred at a much earlier date. In the past, similar findings have been suggested. In 1874, Charles Hart led a biological expedition in the Amazon basin where it proposed that terra preta had been used for sugar plantations, though his findings were dismissed at the time. This miraculous soil is what gives us the Amazon rainforest we know today. Civilizations that used to live within the Amazon since the 16th century, we have held the warped belief that the Amazon rainforest was largely untouched and entirely natural. It was a common assumption that prior to the Spanish invasions, only small groups of nomadic people lived intermittently along the Amazon riverbanks and estuary, though new research suggests otherwise, revealing vast interconnected villages near the Amazon. Areas of the Amazon that previously could not be explored have been made accessible due to the development of satellite imagery. This allows for even the densest areas of the forest to be explored, letting archaeologists search for the ancient geoglyphs that indicate the presence of civilizations. Geoglyphs are art pieces formed through the moving of the landscape, such as arrangements of stones. The team, funded in part by National Geographic, had a set of 24 coordinates they considered leads, all of which proved to be positive. One in particular, however, proved to be incredibly useful, leading scientists to ceramics and charcoal, which testing indicated comes from 1410 CE. Trends also seem to show that the geoglyphs are most likely to be found in places on high elevation, such as the hills within the Amazon. This new research shows that the civilizations had settled in a wider space than we thought, as people lived further than the riverside with settlements spanning over 1,100 miles. Another conclusion drawn from this study is that the population densities predicted through computer modeling were higher than thought previously. It was thought prior to this research that 2 million lived in the Amazon rainforest. But now we know 500,000 to 1 million live within only 7% of the Amazon basin. A previous idea was that after the European, those who lived in the forest had passed away due to diseases and genocide. Primary author of the research project, Jose Iriate, archaeologist from the University of Exeter, said in relation to this, we need to reevaluate the history of the Amazon. Other information we know surrounding the history of the civilizations living in the Amazon is fairly limited. The Inca Empire was at its height of productivity and growth when the Spanish, French, Dutch, and English invasions began to occur. Inca societies were based in Cusco, Peru, and these small societal groups and communities stretched into the Amazon lowlands. The assumption that the rainforest was untouched and the ignoring of these groups stems from the European invasions of early modern Europe. The diseases brought over by these new groups led to rapid loss of lives, effectively erasing the appearance of the hard work and lifestyle of these indigenous groups, as the rainforest appeared uninhabited to newcomers. With the European conquests, many indigenous people became victims in forced labor camps, eventually resulting in the tragedy of enslavement and genocides of these remarkable groups of people. The Amazon is a man-made food forest. Relatively new research suggests that a large proportion of the edible plants we harvest from the Amazon rainforest today were actually planted by other humans over 4,500 years ago. Ancient humans would use farming techniques such as horticulture and permaculture as opposed to the modern agricultural farming we see today. A relatively holistic study took the views and expertise of archaeologists, paleontologists, botanists, and ecologists from the University of Exeter in England. This aimed to give a detailed history of the long-term human land use and its effects, the first study to attempt to tackle this subject. The findings of the study described a significantly more active role of humans in the creation of food than was anticipated. The land that for so long had been considered untouched was, in reality, flourishing due to the human impact of indigenous people. The slash and char technique to improve nutrient content in the soil allowed a host of crops to be grown, with traces of maize, sweet potato, manioc, and squash farming all being evident within eastern Brazil 4,500 years ago. The forest gardening is undeniably more positive and sustainable than the current methods we use in modern society. While some clearing of the rainforest occurred, this was not comparable to the rapid deforestation we see today, or even since the arrival of Europeans within South America. The preservation of the forest and protection of crops and soil proved to not limit the food produce that was gained from the forest. Many have presented their hopes that modern farming will see a shift towards the techniques used in the Amazon by indigenous people to create a healthier rainforest and more sustainable food production. The growth of plants that is continuing after 45 centuries is proof as to the long-term success of forest gardening. The prediction of the Amazon being a man-made food forest was presented by Toby Hemingway, a permaculturist who made his predictions based upon the walnut, chestnuts, hickory nuts, beech nuts, acorns, and high concentration of salmon within the rivers. The environmentally friendly systems provided by groups who were unjustly executed may provide positive alternatives to modern agriculture. Will we ever be able to switch to such an environmentally beneficial form of farming while sustaining the consumerism of modern society? The Amazon rainforest is home to many exciting discoveries and information. From the soil to the people, the rich history is something we can only hope to delve further into in the future. But what do you make of these Amazon discoveries? When castaways are discovered, it's usually revealed that their stories are even better than the fictional accounts we read or see in movies. In fact, it's usually these real people that inspire the legends. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 people and their survival stories after being isolated. U.S. Navy discover people on an island after seeing help sign. Despite what films may have you believe, a set of castaways is rarely rescued by spelling help with palm leaves. In fact, when Navy Lieutenant Commander John Harkins encountered this situation in 2016, he said that neither he nor anybody else in his community had ever seen anything like it. What the U.S. Navy had discovered were 3 men who had been missing after failing to show up at a Micronesian island. A wave had overtaken their boat while they were traveling. Luckily, they all had life jackets and survived by swimming to a deserted island. After 3 days of fending for themselves, a U.S. Navy plane saw their collection of palm leaves that signaled help. They also saw a heat signal on an infrared camera from a signal fire, which originally inspired them to fly closer to the island. The men caught sight of the plane and started waving their orange life jackets. The men on the plane identified the island as Fanatic, which is located hundreds of Papua New Guinea. The plane approached this island several times and used a smoke marker to let the men know they'd been spotted. The men on the plane celebrated their discovery that the castaways responsible for the help sign were still alive. A small, local ship was called in to complete the rescue, and they ended up unscathed. Alexander Selkirk, who survived 4 years and 4 months at sea. Alexander Selkirk is one of the most famous cases of a real-life survival story, inspiring popular fiction. Selkirk, born 1676, started as a wayward youth growing up in Lower Largo. He found himself in trouble over poor church behavior and beating up his brother. However, his dreams of going off to sea were supported by his mother. He joined buccaneering voyages in the South Pacific and eventually ended up on the vessel sink ports with a group of privateers. These people were legalized pirates, captained by Thomas Stradling under the command of William Dampier. Soon, Stradling abandoned Dampier and took full control of the ship. When the ship stopped at an uninhabited island, Selkirk decided it was safer to stay there. He had noticed the ship was worm-eaten, full of disease and leaking. Stradling, delighted in the idea of abandoning Selkirk, left him on the island with a musket, hatchet, knife, cooking pot, bedding, and clothes. Selkirk begged to reboard the ship, realizing not one of the crew members was going to join him, but Stradling didn't let him. While the captain assumed that Selkirk was going to endure the worst fate, the crew that had abandoned him eventually suffered from a loss of their ship. Not all of the crew members survived, and those who did surrendered to the Spanish and were imprisoned. Meanwhile, Selkirk lived along the shoreline. He ate lobsters and spent his time wallowing in loneliness. He also spent a lot of time evading Spanish ships. As a Scotsman and privateer, they would surely take him as a captive. Despite his caution, he at one point was spotted by Spanish sailors. Selkirk hid in a tree and wasn't noticed, despite the group standing right under him. The sailors gave up and returned to their vessel. Sea lions eventually drove him inland. He was able to get meat and milk from goats left over by earlier sailors. He also foraged for other food sources. Selkirk dressed himself in goat skins. The castaway was able to protect himself from the rats that attacked at night by domesticating nearby cats. Overall, he demonstrated impressive survival skills. He made a knife out of the barrel hoops left on the beach. He constructed 2 huts from pepper trees. Eventually, he ran out of gunpowder but was able to chase his prey on foot. This was mostly successful, but led to an injury after he tumbled from a cliff. Though he couldn't move for a day, his fall was cushioned by his prey, preventing a broken back. His feet were so calloused from this hunting that he didn't need shoes. When he wasn't focused on basic survival, Selkirk spent time singing psalms and reading the Bible. Overall, life on the island passed by with less trouble than one would expect. This island would later be renamed Robinson Crusoe Island in 1996, after Selkirk was later connected to that fictional character. His long-awaited rescue came 4 years and 4 months later. This was when the Duke, a ship piloted by William Dampier, arrived on the island. He'd spent so much time alone that he'd practically forgotten his language. Soon Selkirk was privateering again. He returned to his normal self, getting himself in trouble and landing in prison for 2 years. He married twice, enlisted in the Royal Navy, and eventually passed away of yellow fever during a voyage. He was buried at sea. Before he passed away, his fellow crew member Edward Cook popularized Selkirk's adventures in his book called A Voyage to the South Sea and Round the World. His story also inspired Daniel Defoe's famous character Robinson Crusoe. This was in his story published in 1719, The Life and Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. The connection was made clear through the character's appearance. He was depicted as dressed in goatskin like Selkirk, despite residing in the Caribbean. Defoe likely met Selkirk himself after he was rescued. Defoe's piece gained a lot of fame, was translated into many languages, and is often recognized as the first English novel. Selkirk has inspired other authors such as William Cooper, Charles Dickens, and Patrick Kavanagh. A movie detailing his life premiered in South America and was distributed by the Walt Disney Company. Selkirk clearly left quite a legacy. Tom Neal, who survived 16 years. In 1952, Tom Neal found himself a castaway by no accident. After traveling the South Pacific for almost 30 years, Neal decided to live his life in isolation on a completely uninhabited coral atoll. This was in the Cook Islands. He lived there 3 different times for a span of 16 years. This adventure was inspired by American travel writer Robert Frisbee, who'd met Neal and told him about the time he had spent on the island. Later in his autobiography, Neal explained, "I chose to live in the Pacific Islands because life there moves at a sort of pace which you feel God must have had in his mind originally, when he made the sun to keep us warm and provided the fruits of the earth for the taking." When Neal arrived on the island, he claimed a beaten-up shack left from the coast watchers during World War II as his home. He brought with him food tins, tools, seeds, and some paperbacks. He was also accompanied by 2 cats. He repaired the shack and took up hunting, fishing, and gardening. When the sun began to set, he took his spot atop a wooden box on the beach to watch the sky and drink tea. While his life sounded idyllic, it wasn't all enjoyable. Neal dreaded taking the life of 6 pigs who were ruining his garden. He buried them instead of eating them. He spent 6 months building up a pier with coral stones, but it was destroyed in a major storm. After this, things took a turn for the worst. Neal ran out of nicotine and quickly started experiencing withdrawal. One day, he was castigating anchor on the beach when he injured his back so severely he could hardly move. It took him 4 hours to drag himself back to his shack where he fell in and out of consciousness. Luckily, 2 men who were making a stop at the island found him, helped him recover, and sent a ship for him. The ship arrived 2 weeks later and took him back to his original home. Returning to civilization wasn't easy for him, though. The fast, crowded, and restricted lifestyle caused massive discomfort. Neal begged for permission to return to the island. However, the government forbade it, not wanting to be responsible for him. He married and had 2 children and took a job in a warehouse. He spent 6 years living a normal life before a friend took him on their boat back to the island. Then, he spent another 2.5 years on the island. Ultimately, he became tired of the pearl divers interrupting his solitude. He took a 3-year break back home. and wrote his autobiography An Island to Oneself. The profits from the book funded his final stay. He returned to his island and stayed there for an entire decade. The fame generated by his writings caused him to receive constant fan mail. He lived for a few months with a couple and their daughter, when their yacht was hit by a squall, sending their boat foundering on a reef. They were then rescued by a passing ship. In 1977, after suffering from stomach cancer, he was taken back to his home. So he didn't have to pass away alone and could receive medical assistance. He passed away there 8 months later at age 75. The islands he lived on are now protected as a national park. No matter how someone finds themselves to be discovered at sea, it seems survival always leads to formative experiences, a fascinating legacy and stories told for years to come. So what do you make of these interesting survival stories? The ocean is an ominous place. It is a place of great allure and great uncertainty. We know not what dwells beneath the depths or what the passage of time might have concealed underneath the glittering waves. A mere estimated 5% of the ocean has been discovered. Fallen civilizations, mythological beings, or even proof of alien technology may be hidden down in the dark, murky abyss of the Earth's seas. Besides, anything goes on international waters. It is difficult to determine which nation should take charge of missing persons cases that occur on cruise ships and boats. Missing people are typically assumed dead, forever resting at the bottom of the sea with the other undiscovered mysteries. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 mysteries and discoveries of the ocean. Baltic Sea anomaly. Over the decades, many things have been found in the depths. Grand ships lost to time, such as the infamous RMS Titanic, sunken volcanic islands, and a myriad of obscure objects. The Baltic Sea has been a place of intrigue due to many findings of lost ships and forgotten vessels. These discoveries provide us with valuable insight into bygone eras. A researcher responsible for finding many ships explained, "There are hundreds of Viking ships out there, hundreds of old trading ships, hundreds of warships. The Baltics are an archaeological paradise." With such rich findings, it's only to be expected that, eventually, they would come across something unusual. In between Sweden and Finland, the Swedish Ocean Explorer Archaeology team were scavenging the depths for shipwrecks. Instead, they captured an indistinct sonar image of something disc-like and unnatural laying deep underneath the surface. One of the crew members stated, "I have been doing this for nearly 20 years, so I have seen a few objects on the bottom of the sea. However, nothing like this." The sonar revealed a cylindrical shape with a 60-meter diameter with a tail of 400 meters. The cylindrical object laid 200 meters under the sea surface. Peter Lindberg, a member of the team, said, "We've heard lots of different kinds of explanations. The issue lies with the unreliability of the sonar scan. The scan is one-sided and thus it is difficult to determine whether the object is something profound or a simple geological formation." Peter Lindberg explained, "We wanted to look into it some more and decided to keep this totally quiet. We contacted geologists, marine biologists, and when they said they had never seen anything like this, of course, more thoughts were triggered. The discovery was baffling. The disk might very well date back to the late glacial period, about 140,000 years ago." A professor at Stockholm University, Volker Brustchert, stated his theory as to the origins of this object. "My hypothesis is that this structure was formed during the Ice Age, thousands of years ago, which would make it a geological formation." Many scholars share this opinion, and yet prevailing theories of UFOs and mysterious otherworldly devices remain as top explanations in the eyes of the people. The Cassina coal boat. On April 10, 1990, a snapper boat set off on a fishing expedition in the Atlantic Ocean. For the majority of the previous month, the ship had been undergoing maintenance, and on the second day of the expedition, at allegedly 4:30 a.m., one of the crew members, Nathan, noticed that there was something wrong with the ship. It was stagnant and churning forward in a worryingly unstable manner. Brothers Nathan and the Captain Billy Joe Neesmith discovered a store of water in the hold and the pumps were no longer running. The power went out and any attempts to get help through the radio were futile. Nathan woke up the other 2 crew members, Keith Wilkes and Franklin Brantley, who attempted to gather and pour the water overboard using buckets. But this failed as the boat continued to sink deeper into the waves. Captain Neesmith ordered for the ship to be abandoned, since they would not be able to salvage it. Fortunately, they had a raft on board which they all decided to board, but the raft was run down and had not been adequately cared for during the ship's maintenance, and a fungus had gotten into the wood, rotting it from within. The raft was small and the 4 men struggled to fit onto it. They floated upon the waves until the hull of their sunken boat drifted towards them. Nathan decided to attempt riding on the hatch drifting nearby despite the pleas from his fellow crew members to remain on the raft. They had no way of knowing what would happen if touching the shipwreck was safe, not to mention they feared the possibility of being split up on the vast, dark ocean. Nathan swam until he reached the submerged hull, but the dark dust concealed his vision of the raft. By the morning of April 12th, he saw a freighter in the distance which circled around his crewmates for several hours, but the freighter never came for him. Fate seemed grim for Nathan, but then the ship's bait box broke off and he saved himself by turning it into a raft just before the whole boat sunk into the Atlantic. He was rescued on April 15, 1990, terribly sunburnt and on the verge of death from dehydration. He hoped to be reunited with his crewmates, but this chance never arrived because, despite a search by the U.S. Coast Guard, his 3 crewmates were missing. Nathan believes that the freighter which saved them dropped them off in a different nation. Oneida, the sister of Nathan and Captain Billy Joe Neesmith, received a strange call from someone speaking Spanish, but the only thing she understood was her name and phone number before the caller hung up. The owner of the snapper boat, Mr. Tyson, received a similar call from someone speaking broken English. Oneida and Tyson received 3 more calls between them until 1991, when the caller said, "I am bringing them home in comprehensive English." Oneida stated in her testimony that the caller must have been a Spanish-speaking native from another country who found or befriended the 3 crew members. The 3 men, Billy Joe Neesmith, Keith Wilkes, and Franklin Brantley, are still lost at sea and have fashionably been declared deceased. Despite this, the strange calls suggest they were alive and on their way home. Since then, there has been no contact at all with either Mr. Tyson or Oneida. Despite the fact 30 years have now passed, their families still pray for their safe return. The man left ashore. September 8, 1863. A man was found ashore on the beach of Sandy Cove with both his legs amputated. The man was taken in by the local Acadians who gave him the name Jerome. He was mute. The locals helped him out of Christian charity, but due to the lack of communication and his severe disability, all his decisions were made for him and he was unable to speak for himself. Jerome lived for 42 years with the Dedier-Comeau family. Zabeth Dedier took care of him and nursed him, and he became an honorary member of their family, even watching the Comeau children grow up. His life with them was simple, for his amputation made it impossible for him to be independent or to do manual work most men did. He would wake up, stare out the window, or go into the sun in the summer and eat meals with the family and sleep. Jerome passed away in 1912 and was buried in the Catholic cemetery of Medigan along St. Mary's Bay in Nova Scotia. Decades passed and various individuals claimed they knew who Jerome was. Many believed the man to be Italian, perhaps a mutilated nobleman who kept his silence to save himself from political rivals. Another theory was that he was an Italian naval officer, injured on board and cruelly abandoned by his crewmates. Those who cared for him claimed he would sometimes utter Colombo and Trieste, further proving that he was Italian. Some, however, believed him to be Jeremiah Mahoney, an Irish immigrant who emigrated from Ireland to escape his family. Theories were abundant. Another theory claimed him to be Gamby the Frozen Man. Gamby was found in 1859 on a logging trail in New Brunswick and cared for in the parish of Chip. His legs were amputated due to gangrene in the spring of 1861. The taxpayers of the village paid to have the man removed in 1863 because caring for him was too expensive. They believed Gamby to be Italian. The sequence of events and similarities in the story makes many people believe Gamby and Jerome to be the same person. Jerome never spoke enough to reveal the truth about himself. The ocean has served to be a place of intrigue, terror, and fascination for millennia. It is the great unknown. The only thing we truly know is that we don't know most of what is hidden away in the impossible to traverse depths. Lost artifacts from ancient civilizations, proof of alien technologies, missing shipwrecks, and the forgotten bodies of those lost at sea under inexplicable circumstances, may all very well be floating in the internal abyss of the seas, concealed from our sight. Are we fated to discover more of our oceans in the future, or are we fated to never find out the truth at all? Only time will tell. But what do you make of these ocean mysteries and discoveries? Going back a few days ago, a rare blue moon could be seen. This was the first time in 70 years that it landed on Halloween. It was the second full moon to happen in 1 month, meaning it got labeled as a blue moon. Interestingly, it was actually a mix-up that happened in 1999 that got it this name. The term blue moon was actually meant to refer to the third full moon in a calendar month, but the label continues today. Regardless, it's still quite rare for this to happen twice in a month, and what's even rarer is for one of these to happen on Halloween. The last time this happened was back in 1944. During these events, many people point their cameras and telescopes towards the moon. Interestingly though, some people captured more than what they intended, and this was the case for one person that captured the moon in Birmingham. However, when looking back at their image, they noticed that it contained something strange. They soon shared their image online where various people gave their opinions on what they thought it could be. The person behind the photograph said the following: "This photograph was captured above Birmingham in England. As with most people, I looked out for the moon as it was a blue moon. I have a Canon camera and a low-budget telescope, so decided to get both out for the occasion. After snapping several dozen photographs, I then went in to review them. However, on one of them, I noticed 4 lights sitting close to the moon. I'm not sure what they are, and I didn't see them as when I was taking the photographs. I was looking at the camera screen and I think they would have been too small to pick up. Regardless, I have no idea what they are, and I'm interested to see what people make of them." End quote. Various users gave their opinions on the photograph, with one man saying the following: "I'm someone who does a lot of astrophotography, and one of the issues is that you can get light interference. However, when you're taking photographs of something big such as the moon, this isn't so much of an issue. The moon is one of the easiest things to photograph in the night sky because it's so big, although you can sometimes get the odd light. You never normally see foreign a line like this. Very strange." End quote. Others went down the route of suggesting that what the person captured wasn't unidentified flying object, with this person saying the following: "I've seen many different photographs that show similar things. I don't think these are natural, but rather come under the category of UFOs. These shaped crafts are commonly seen on Earth, and various amateur photographers have captured similar-looking objects." End quote. As UFO researchers have pointed out in the past, the moon is actually one place where many alleged UFOs have been captured, with researchers saying that there's more going on around our moon than what we're being told. Scientists and researchers, though, have spoken out and said this isn't the case, and these strange lights are most likely debris on the camera or lights coming from a different source. Amateur researchers have hit back at these claims, though, and go into detail that places like the moon and the International Space Station are actually hotspots for UFOs. For those that aren't aware, the International Space Station has a variety of cameras to monitor spacewalks and other areas that need to be under 24-hour surveillance. This has allowed the agency to play live footage on internet shows, websites, live television broadcasting, and so on. This is to help build up an interest in space. Recently, there have been numerous events where footage of strange objects can be seen floating in the distance, and this has led many to believe that is extraterrestrial in origin. After such incidents are spotted, the footage will later be removed or edited, the live feed will be cut, or the entire instance will be completely ignored by NASA. One incident happened back in 2014, and amateur researchers have said it's some of the best evidence they have of a UFO in space. The object could be seen on one of the live cams. Many people across the world were watching on this particular occasion. However, something they couldn't explain was the strange object that quickly made itself known. The object appeared to be sleek and orange in color. After only a few seconds, those watching the live feed said it docked onto the International Space Station, and shortly after it did this, the live cameras were shut down, with those watching the event saying that all they could now see was a blue or purple screen. Interestingly, many who watched the live cams have said this is a common occurrence when an unidentified flying object is seen in the background. Others have even said that NASA themselves sometimes zoom in to get a better look at the object, but after determining that it's not part of any spacecraft, they quickly shut off the cameras. It's this type of activity that's caused some to believe that there could be mysterious objects visiting our planet. The objects that could be seen at the International Space Station wasn't there very long before the live cams were shut off. Since then, it hasn't been seen since. But this was enough for people, as they were able to take screenshots of the strange-looking object. After this, various people started to give their ideas on what they thought the object was. One individual suggested they were looking at a genuine UFO, and that NASA were not quick enough to shut off the cameras on this occasion, leaving all those who tuned in to see the object very clearly. Astronomers have said these objects can be explained using everyday things, but people have struggled to explain some of the objects that are seen close to the International Space Station, with amateur researchers saying that some of these are definitely not space debris, with one UFO researcher saying the following: "I understand that some of these objects can be explained as space debris, and that makes sense, but it's obvious that some of these are not space debris. Also, if this was the case, why does the space station cameras shut off when they come into view? If they were just space debris, why shut down the live feed? It's this kind of behavior that makes people question these objects." End quote. So what do you make of these mysterious objects seen close to our moon? Do you think they're just camera anomalies? Or do you think this person accidentally captured an unidentified flying object? Despite horror stories featuring monsters and curses, one of the most dangerous and deadly parts of our planet is simultaneously one of the things that we rely on the most: the ocean. Immeasurable mysteries lurk beneath the waves, and the vastness of the sea ensures that those who fall victim to the swells may very well never be heard from again. From sea monsters of the type usually only described in legends, to storms of such enormous that they can swallow entire cities, the ocean constantly reminds us that we are at its mercy. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 fascinating mysteries from the ocean. Squid attacks U.S. Navy ship. Most naval battleships are equipped to withstand the worst forms of sea warfare and storms that nature can throw at them, and the Knox-class U.S. naval destroyer was likely more prepared than most. However, it turned out that they were no match for a monstrous sea monster that attacked it during a special operations mission in the Pacific Ocean in 1978. It was attacked by an unseen monster from below. It caused severe technical issues and the failure of the sonar system vital for navigation of enemy waters, requiring the destroyer to return to port in California, where it was removed from the water for repairs, and what they found shocked them. There was incredible and extensive damage to the hull of the ship, including deep cuts to the rubber coating that protected the ship. Over 8% of this supposedly indestructible coating was damaged with cuts, gashes, dents, and scrapes. Inside the largest of these gashes, the repair team found huge curving hooks embedded in the hull. These hooks were strikingly familiar, and they resembled the hooks found in the suction cups of large squid, except that the only problem was that these were over 5 times as large as any known squid species. Analysis of the gashes and the hooks found that the creature who had attacked the ship was likely a squid of almost 46 meters long. This is over 3 times as large as the current record-holding species of squid, which can grow up to 14 meters long. Those who have searched for this potentially undiscovered species have dubbed it the USS Steen monster because of the deadly capacity of those hooks. As unbelievable as it may seem that a monstrous, it is a widely acknowledged fact that our knowledge of the moon's surface is far greater than our knowledge of what lies at the floor of the ocean. It is entirely feasible that many creatures could haunt the seafloor, such as the giant squid. Then again, it is also entirely possible that what attacked the USS Stein was no squid at all, and was instead a fearsome creature of entirely different origins that has yet to be discovered. The only way to solve this mystery would be to discover one day whatever it was that caused such damage to a supposedly indestructible ship. The mystery of the Marlborough. It is not uncommon for ships to be tossed to pieces at the mercy of violent storms brewing in the deep sea, or spit onto unseen coral reefs and shredded by the underlying rocks. Occasionally, a ship will simply disappear and leave the family members of her crew to wonder at its fate. This appeared to be the case with the Marlborough, which was a large, iron merchant ship that went missing in 1890 after setting sail from New Zealand in January, on its way to bring wool and frozen meats to London. In those days, it took many months to make the treacherous passage across open seas. Occasionally, the ship would fall prey to the submerged icebergs, hidden off the coast of Cape Horn or some other dangerous hazard lurking in the open sea, and would never be seen again. So when the Marlborough still had not arrived at port in April, it was assumed lost at sea, not an uncommon fate for merchant ships at the time. The case became instantly more mysterious when the Marlborough turned up again 23 years later in 1913 off the coast of Cape Horn, with the skeletons of her crew scattered curiously all over her deck. The report of the sailors who found the remains of the ship reported that about 20 skeletons were found on board and in a lot of different locations. One was found alone directly under the wheel, and another one found alone on the bridge, with 5 more nearby. No less than 3 skeletons were found by the ladder leading below the deck. The largest group found in a single area consisted of 10 skeletons, in what is known as the mess room, the main social quarters of the ship. The most mysterious part of the discovery of what remains of the Marlborough was the placement of the skeletons. Because they were scattered throughout the ship, as though going through their normal operating routines, they must have all passed away abruptly from the same thing and all at the same time. The bodies in the hatchway suggest that they may have been running from something, although the other bodies throughout the ship were all out being rounded up by pirates and dying. Additionally, what was presumably the captain was found under the steering wheel as though he passed away while trying to direct the ship, which would be an odd priority if your crewmates were losing their lives. Although the mystery of the Marlborough has riddled minds since its discovery in 1913, and the ship was thoroughly searched for clues at the time of its discovery, we will likely never know the circumstances that led to this unusual placement of bodies throughout the ship. The Copenhagen disappearance. The Marlborough is not the only ship to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The Scandinavian sailing ship was the largest sailing ship in the world upon her launch in 1921 and was fully equipped with 20-story high sailing masts that would lead her to successfully sail twice around the world. She was primarily a training vessel that allowed the sons of prominent Danish families to learn how to sail, so that they could eventually make a career as an officer. Because of this, Copenhagen frequently set sail with light or no cargo loads. After unloading a light cargo of cement and chalk in Buenos Aires, she underwent one of these empty voyages on a journey from Buenos Aires to Australia, headed by the capable and respected Captain Hans Andersen. Andersen and a small crew of 15, along with 45 cadets, from prominent Danish families set sail for the 7-week journey. On December 22nd, a passing Norwegian steamer received an all-is-well radio signal from the ship as it passed Tristan da Cunha Island in the South Atlantic. This exchange became the last time the ship was seen or heard. At this time, radio was a fairly new technology and had a limited range at sea. Captain Andersen was not fond of using it. So initially, the Danish East Asiatic Company that owned the ship was not concerned at the lack of communication. However, as the days and weeks passed and there was still no sign of the ship and she did not appear at her expected port, the company became more and more alarmed. Due to the extensive cost of the extravagant vessel, as well as pressure from the wealthy families whose sons were cadets on the missing ship, the company launched an extensive search of the area around Tristan da Cunha for several months. There had been rumors of a damaged ship sighted off the coast that had quickly disappeared. However, there was no sign of the ship and the search expanded towards the Australian coast without result. At long last, the Danish East Asiatic Company was forced to declare the ship lost at sea. However, that is where the mystery begins. Reported several sightings of a Phantom 5-mast sailing ship that matched the description of the Copenhagen, causing rumors that the ship was haunting the sea where it went down. Then in 1934, men working in the South Atlantic discovered a sealed bottle that contained an account from a cadet on board the ship, saying that the ship struck an iceberg, forcing the crew to take lifeboats in the middle of a gale force ice storm and watches there into the sea, leaving behind a grim fate for the passengers. Although there is no way to tell if the note is legitimate, it supports the prevailing theory that she was sunk in the Arctic waters, although another is that she capsized due to the lack of cargo on board. Whatever the case, Copenhagen was never seen again and remains a prevailing mystery of the sea. As long as man has been able to build boats, we have attempted to conquer the seas. And at times it appears that we have been successful. However, The untold numbers of mysteries that lie within the waters remind us that even the most impenetrable and impressive ships are still at the mercy of the vengeance of the waves. But what do you make of these ocean mysteries? A former NASA engineer has made bold claims around Saturn. He goes on to say that giant crafts can be seen around this planet, and that the National Aeronautics and Space Administration are well aware of this. The former employee goes on to detail that unidentified flying objects are interested in Saturn's rings, and on numerous occasions we've captured them lurking close to the planet, who's said to have been an employee at NASA's research center. Details that these crafts that have been captured are not hard to spot, mainly because they're massive, easily being several miles in length. He said the following about the mysterious objects that were detected close to Saturn. Alien spacecrafts are proliferating in our solar system and around these ringed planets. End quote. One of the ways he was able to find out about this craft was because he had exclusive access to raw images. These are images that are sent back to NASA that haven't yet been edited or tampered with. Something that's commonly done by the space agency and that they're open about. They claim that various images we see have been edited or part of various images that have been put together, commonly known as composite images. These raw images, however, gave him an insight into what the public weren't able to see, and in various photographs he could see junk craft sitting close to Saturn and its rings. Knowing that these objects were being kept a secret, he decided that the general public should know about them, and so went about releasing a book. However, he soon revealed that he wasn't able to get it published in the United States. This caused him to travel to Scotland in the hopes of getting it published. He did, and the book was titled Ringmakers of Saturn. Many interesting photographs have been presented to back up his claims, but one of the most interesting ones shows what appears to be a giant cylindrical craft. He calls them electromagnetic vehicles. It was estimated that this giant object was over 2,000 miles long. Dr. Bergrund said the following about the mysterious objects. That's where I first discovered them, and they're proliferating. They are now in Uranus and Jupiter, wherever you see some rings. I call it the ringmaker. I could be looking down on the rings and I could see parallel lines crossing all of the rings at once. That's about as long as you could go. I could tell that those lines marked the outside of the object. I say that it's an electromagnetic vehicle, because I can identify streamline patterns, and I know that they were potential lines, and that says it was electrical. He claims that these giant crafts are building the rings on these planets, with theorists saying that these crafts can be found close to many celestial bodies in our solar system, including the Moon, Mars, and the Sun. It appears, though, that amateur researchers can't agree on why these crafts are here. Some believe that they're monitoring the solar system, while others believe that they're actually other life forms that we share our solar system with. One of the issues, though, is the size of these crafts. The majority of them are hundreds, if not thousands of miles in length. So what are these things? And if they are genuine, who's building them? One amateur researcher said the following. These giant crafts need to be investigated as they've been witnessed for years. I think that at this point we have enough proof to make a case that these are real. One of the problems is that we look at them and apply human ideas, thinking that humans can't build a craft of this size, so it can't be done. But this is the wrong way of looking at it, and will actually set us back if we keep doing this. Just because humans can't do it, it doesn't mean it can't be done. After all, we are talking about the universe here. Human laws don't apply. I think more research needs to be done surrounding this topic. And the quicker we take it seriously, the quicker we'll get answers. End quote. Scientists and researchers, though, are not impressed with these kinds of images, with them saying that the most likely explanation is that these objects are just space debris or anomalies picked up on their camera equipment. When talking about unidentified flying objects in space, one researcher went on to say the following: most commonly UFO claims are due to perfectly natural flaws or artifacts in our publicly available data. Some of the things that people are seeing are planets, cosmic rays, software glitches, and debris. End quote. Another NASA official said the following about these claims. The majority of these alleged UFO sightings can be easily explained. One of the things that people see is space debris that's made its way in front of the cameras. When these pieces of debris are up close, it can look like an unidentified flying object. In reality, people are just seeing a common piece of space debris. Even with this explanation, UFO researchers have said this isn't what we're seeing. And in some cases, these objects stick around for several hours. With one UFO researcher saying the following, "What I find strange is how these cylinder-shaped UFOs are seen on this planet. I think if it wasn't for that, then I would be more inclined to believe these are natural. But it's just strange how we see similar-looking UFOs on our planet. Every year people report different shaped graphs. So I think that there could be more to this than what scientists are letting on." End quote. As mentioned, NASA officials have said that when space debris gets close up to the cameras, it can't take the shape of a UFO. And many times, this is what we're seeing. Officials say if it's not space debris, then the other explanation is that this is a camera anomaly. And these happen during the processing stage. But as some researchers have pointed out, some of these objects are seen on the raw file images before anything has happened. With space being so vast, is it really far-fetched to believe that we share it with other life forms? As of right now, NASA has said they've never recorded a UFO, and that every alleged UFO can be easily explained as space debris. So what do you guys make of these mysterious objects seen close to Saturn? Do you think they're linked to the UFO phenomena? Or do you think they're just space debris? Space is a vast and largely unexplored place. Advancing technology and the development of our scientific understanding has helped us find out more about what lies beyond our planet and has opened the door to future exploration. However, our understanding of space and our equipment to investigate what lies beyond our planet is still very limited, leaving unsolved puzzles rife within the field of astronomy. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 space discoveries that have prompted questions and speculation. Mysterious spacecraft orbiting Earth. For over 700 days, an unidentified object referred to as X-37b has been orbiting Earth, and the U.S. military Air Force appears to have information regarding this item. Some have begun to refer to the spacecraft as a spaceplane. X-37b is the 5th space plane mission called OTV-5. This spacecraft has no crew, is solar-powered, and most puzzling seems to be a military product. OTV was launched in September 2017, aided by the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, the company established by Elon Musk. OTV-5 has continued to thrive for longer than prior models, surpassing 717 days. The X-37b military spacecraft continues to orbit the Earth with no signs of returning in the near future. Does not resemble the spacecraft typically used by NASA, the American Space Exploration Team, and instead has been confirmed to be under the control of the U.S. military Air Force. Whilst there are similarities between the object and NASA spacecrafts, notable differences led to many people speculating that the craft was not one of NASA's prior to military confirmation. The lack of answers to people questioning why this craft has been orbiting Earth has that appear to keep on growing. One of these, perhaps the simplest to wrap your head around and therefore the theory gaining the most momentum, is that the mysterious spacecraft is a military drone deployed by the U.S. Air Force to spy upon the public. Editor of Spaceflight, Dr. David Baker, spoke to BBC News in 2012, referring to the event as space-to-space surveillance, and that his assumption and belief was that the X-37b may be used to maintain a close watch on China's nascent space station. This theory was refuted by many critics who said that the orbital path of the craft made the likelihood of spying specifically upon China unlikely, leading to the theory being dismissed. Another popular theory surrounds the creation of M-Drive, an engine that does not need any fuel in order to function. This, as of yet, is a hypothetical creation. In theory, microwaves within a conical chamber move around, bouncing off surfaces. The M-Drive theory claims that this movement of these microwaves within the chamber makes a thrust, which propels the engine. This would make space travel more widely accessible, as it would be cheaper and more efficient due to the lack of fuel required. This would in turn facilitate more space exploration, answering and uncovering more mysteries and secrets we are yet to consider in our universe. Whilst M-Drive is considered to be an enticing theory, that is all it is. The M-Drive is not considered plausible or likely to become a reality. Newton's third law, every action has an equal opposite reaction, is flaunted in this theory. The lack of fuel means nothing is emitted from the engine. While the M-Drive claims to be able to achieve this, there is no evidence, and so it is often dismissed as an explanation. To the demanding questions given to them, they described X-37B and OTV-5 to be an experimental test project to illustrate technologies for a reliable, reusable, and unmanned space test platform for the U.S. Air Force. This answer failed to provide the depth many people were hoping to receive regarding the missions, of which there have been 5. The U.S. Air Force has often been considered to have answered the questions surrounding the spacecraft's purpose in an indirect manner, by filling the remainder of their explanation with technical vocabulary that left readers puzzled and none the wiser. What is flying around our planet as we speak? Do you think a fuel-free form of space travel has been developed? Or do you think that the U.S. government is spying on Earth? NASA spots mysterious object in space. A strange object has been sighted by NASA and likened to an empty trash bag. And as surprising as it may be, it isn't the first discovery of its kind. An object that is several meters wide and seemingly lightweight has been seen floating in space. Current assumptions are that the object, which has been named a 10BMLZ, is some form of waste material, left behind from a previous rocket launch. Whilst it has not been determined which rocket launch has left a 10BMLZ out in space, it has been concluded that the material is most likely a metallic foil. A 10BMLZ is currently on an elliptical orbit, taking an oval path as opposed to a circular orbit. This means its distance from Earth drastically varies from being only 600 kilometers away from our planet to being 538,160 kilometers away, which is 1.4 times as far as the Moon is from the Earth. This elliptical orbit can be skewed even more, however, due to the small mass of this object. The Sun emits radiation pressure, which interacts with a 10BMLZ in such an influential manner due to the object's small mass. This results in this so-called trash bag being pushed around. Outside of the course it would naturally follow, creating an orbit change many have described as chaotic. This spontaneity means we cannot predict the path it will follow. Numerous possibilities remain. The object could re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. A 10BMLZ could continue its orbit indefinitely, or a number of unforeseen events could occur. The object was first seen by the Hawaii Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System telescope. This observation was then confirmed by the North Holt Branch observatories in London, as well as confirming the sighting's validity. They also reiterated the surprisingly lightweight and large size of a 10BMLZ and identified the unusual orbit. Other items have been seen within space and likened to plastic bags due to their sporadic movements, largely influenced by radiation pressure. This discovery has piqued the interest of a greater number of people, though, due to it being the first seen at a distant orbit. Scientists have seen a mystery orbit in space that could solve a puzzle about black holes. Black holes have gripped the minds of great intellectuals for decades, yet exciting revelations are still occurring, giving us more clues to the constantly growing puzzle. Recent discoveries have given more answers to the mass gap. Scientists have previously operated under the assumption that the maximum mass of a neutron star celestial body that may develop into a black hole was 2.5 solar masses, or 2.5 times the mass of the Sun, and that the minimum mass of a black hole was 5 solar masses. This left an uncertain gap and the space between 2.5 and 5 solar masses that was not accounted for, and so became known as the mass gap. Until recently, the mass gap was a relatively theoretical issue, as no objects that fell within this class had been discovered. An object discovered in August 2019, reported on in June 2020, has been found to weigh 2.6 solar masses, prompting the question, is this the lightest black hole yet to be discovered or the heaviest neutron star? Professor Vicky Caligara of Northwestern University commented that, "We've been waiting decades to solve this mystery." She emphasizes that regardless as to the ultimate class of the object in the mass gap, the signals picked up that alerted physicists to the discovery were created through the merging of the strange object with a black hole at a staggering 23 solar masses. This prompted a series of gravitational waves throughout space, which were detected in our observatories on Earth. LIGO referred to this signal as highly unusual, prompting further study and research. The two bodies interact in an unexpected way, shedding an element of uncertainty on the once presumed to be accurate understanding of black hole formations. More observations and data collection will need to take place in order to confirm this. This information will presumably be gathered through the use of light-based telescopes. The questions that are now being tackled following the discovery of this object at 2.6 solar masses are: why has it been so difficult to locate items within the mass gap if they are out there? Is the mass gap real at all? Are the measurements for the mass gap incorrect, and how are neutron stars and black holes truly formed? Has our understanding of this celestial phenomena changed? The light emissions, whilst limited due to the object becoming engulfed by the black hole, are being tracked from the Virgo and LIGO observatories, though the apparent destruction of the mass gap object means only a minor observation could be noted. As technology advances, we can only hope to discover more objects within space like this, as we strive to ask more questions and gain more answers. From the exciting revelation of new items to discoveries that make us question what we already know, the searching and exploring of space is never ending. We can only hope to find answers to the puzzles out there and continue to make our way through the universe. But what do you make of these space discoveries?